Welcome to episode 2 of Reality Check. It is 2018. This is the first episode of the year, and we are going to get right into the news. As you can tell, the audio should be working. Fingers crossed. Making sure this mic is working. So the first story I want to cover today is around net neutrality. And this may seem like old news. This was back in November, but a lot of new developments have happened around this topic. The first being Ajit Pai drew out from going to CES this year, which is the big consumer electronics show happening in a number of weeks. And according to the source, he backed out of going to this after a number of death threats that he received. So after his big decision with the FCC, he has kind of backed off of a lot of media engagement. So stuff like this, where going to these events that are technology related could be an issue for him, especially since we've noticed a trend where most of the media outlets that he engages with have been more conservative leaning, which tends to be the opposite when you go to these technology conventions. Seeing as the technology community isn't too happy with a number of his decisions recently, it would make sense why he wouldn't want to have a big presence at one of these shows. And another piece in this net neutrality is the city of Fort Collins in Colorado that passed a measure to create municipal internet available to the whole city. So this comes about 2 months after these cable lobbies failed to stop this act in Fort Collins. So now here we are, the city is moving forward with these plans to build gigabit speed fiber internet throughout the city. So if you lived in the area of the Front Range during election time, when this measure was passed, you would hear a lot of commercials opposing it, and they all sounded very genuine and, from like community groups that genuinely opposed it. But looking further into these measures, you would notice that these were being funded by cable lobbies. And of course, a big piece of what Fort Collins is trying to do here is bring back net neutrality, which is supposed to be a big focus of their new broadband service. Is they want to uphold a lot of the net neutrality guidelines. Our next two stories focus around America's favorite punching bag, Donald Trump. So the first piece comes out of the private sector, where Comcast laid off 500 employees after claiming that tax cuts would create thousands of jobs. So Comcast kind of changed their opinion and views on this issue, where they're now claiming that ignoring the 500 employees that they laid off, so they're planning on giving $1,000 in bonuses to over 100,000 employees and investing this money in better infrastructure. Of those three claims, we already know one of them has failed. And these bonuses, the numbers haven't really come out yet. And the infrastructure thing was very vague. It said over $500 billion would be invested in infrastructure over the next 5 years. So maybe this time next year, we'll see if an equivalent amount has gone into infrastructure improvements. But, we really won't know until those 5 years have come by. So this is kind of stepping around the issue that Comcast is doing. They don't really want to address the fact that, oh, hey, maybe we're not actually supporting job growth like we promised. When these net neutrality rules came into place. So this is also kind of a net neutrality issue as well, because it says that the new recategorization of the internet would actually boost the number of employees that they could hire. And so far, it's all just fallen through. It's fake and open-ended promises. So our next story, and no, it is definitely not 2 days later, comes out of Los Angeles, where a man is suspected of calling in a hoax kidnapping of a Kansas City man. So this is really a story about a swatting gone wrong. And really what a swatting is something in the gaming community where one gamer or Twitch streamer will call the local police department or FBI, whatever agency, and call in a threat of some sort of magnitude where they have to send out armed police to apprehend the suspect, which is the Twitch streamer or gamer um, being swatted. I'll cut that to make it look good. So in this case, Andrew Finch, 28, um, was. So in this case, Andrew Finch, 28, of Kansas City, was swatted by his local police department, who, during his apprehension, shot and killed him. So the man accused of calling in the hoax threat, who we shall not name, was apprehended and is currently on several charges. Um, what they're looking at right now is a manslaughter charge. Um, so the family of the man who was shot uh, is actually wanting to press charges against the police officer who shot him. So stepping away from that story, it's a very complex, a lot of moving parts, and I'll be sure to update you guys on that in the next video. But I want to move on to this other story about how the Trump administration is going about their policies towards legal and illegal cannabis. So Senator Jeff Sessions has been known for a long time as being very anti marijuana and cannabis. And he's taking this to a new level with how the federal government treats the state's rights to um, practice legal cannabis both medically and recreationally. So, under those Obama era regulations, the federal government kind of had a hands off approach, sort of giving the right to legalize recreational and medical marijuana to the states. So, under these regulations that have been put forward by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, um, that's kind of not the case anymore. So, we don't quite yet know how the federal government plans on taking these new deregulations. What the administration needs to realize is that the criminalization of this substance, it does nothing but line the pockets of private prisons and other entities like that. It increases the prison population. So personally, I hope that someone in administration takes a look at this and puts their foot down. Um, I'm not I'm not saying it's likely that the government is going to legalize marijuana nationally. However, I do hope someone reins in Sessions. So, for a quick bit on local news, a Denver City Council has they have moved forward on measures to ban bump stocks in the city and county of Denver. Now, this goes along with other regulations such as limiting magazines to only 15, which was a recent thing that happened a couple years ago. But this would be supplementary to that, where also these bump stocks, which were used by the Las Vegas shooter to push out more bullets per second than would normally be capable with that weapon. And a number a number of military professionals came in and agreed that the only thing this the only thing this piece of equipment was built to do was kill more people. And I think the Denver City Council recognizes that that's not really something that the people of Denver need. There's no need to kill more people anywhere in the United States, let alone in Denver or any other city. This ban makes sense. And why it took this long to get noticed or picked up is beyond me. I can only imagine it's some ridiculous campaign by the NRA to protect people's rights. And the NRA is a whole nother battle, which is interesting because you don't really hear a whole lot about the NRA in this article. It let Denver move forward on being more progressive on regulations of these outrageous weapons. No one needs to shoot that many bullets a second. Nobody needs to have guns that can. Nobody needs to have guns that can kill hundreds of people in a matter of minutes. That's outrageous. And I'm not trying to turn this into a gun control conversation because everyone brings in gun control to the issue of mass shootings when that's not the primary issue. It is an issue, but it's not what needs to be discussed. What needs to be discussed is mental health care in the United States. And unfortunately, I knew it would go this way. I didn't want to take this video in that direction. But there you have it. This is some big news coming out of Denver that, in my opinion, hopefully leads to more like this, more bans like this, more control measures in other cities. And one last story that I want to cover at the end of this video is, I don't want to call it lighthearted, but it can make you chuckle. In South Carolina, lawmakers are pushing forward a bill to replace Confederate era statues with statues commemorating black soldiers of the South. To some of you, you may already know why this is laughable to me and many others, especially any historians who know anything about that era. Here's a quick rundown. There were no African American soldiers of the Confederacy. These lawmakers attempt to back up this bill by saying it's educational. They're learning from this bill. But if it gets passed, then it's just a historical inaccuracy. I'm all for recognizing people of color in history. But you can't make up history to cover up a mistake. What I think gets overlooked too much about these statues is the fact that nearly none of them are Confederate era statues. A large majority of them were built post Civil War and especially post Civil Rights Movement. You look at a chart of when these statues were built and you see little spikes where civil rights movements began and were flourishing. So these statues were put up by organizations to remind people that, hey, what if instead of civil rights, we honored these people that hated African Americans? So, I mean, I think it's covering up a band-aid. Personally, I analogize this to covering up a horrible, nasty wound with a used band-aid. This would have no positive effects. And even if it does teach the people of South Carolina that, hey, I don't know, don't hate African Americans, then great, but wouldn't it be better to immortalize real African American heroes than fake imaginary story people? Wouldn't it be better to immortalize real African American heroes of our country than these made up heroes by some South Carolina lawmakers? So that's going to be it for today's video. It got a little bit political and yeah, but I hope you join me next week, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Leave any questions, concerns, comments, anything you want to tell me down in the comments, and I will definitely get back to you. Also, hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. All those links are in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.